August 21, 1942. 1:30 in the morning, Colonel Kona Ichiki stands in the darkness, watching 9-17 of Japan's finest soldiers prepare to charge across a sandbar. In 6 hours, 800 of them will be dead. But here's what makes this story extraordinary. Ichiki isn't worried, he's excited. Because every intelligence report, every tactical assessment, every piece of wisdom passed down through Japanese military doctrine tells him the same thing. The Americans waiting on the other side of that creek will break. They always break. Except they won't. And when the sun rises on August 21st, it won't just be Ichiki's regiment that lies shattered in the sand. It will be something far more dangerous. An idea. A belief so fundamental to Japanese military thinking that its destruction will change the course of the Pacific War. This is the story of Guadalcanal. But more than that, it's the story of what happens when an entire military builds its strategy on a lie. To understand what happened on Guadalcanal, you need to understand what Japanese commanders believed about war itself. For decades, the Imperial Japanese military had operated on a single, unshakable principle: Yamato-damashii, the spirit of Japan. This wasn't just propaganda. This was foundational doctrine taught at every level of military training. The concept was simple but powerful. Japanese soldiers possessed a spiritual superiority that could overcome any material disadvantage. Where Western armies relied on machines and industrial might, Japan relied on something deeper: the indomitable will of warriors descended from the sun goddess Amaterasu herself. Think about how radical this is. Japanese military planners genuinely believed that willpower could defeat firepower, that spirit could triumph over steel. And here's the terrifying part. For years, reality seemed to prove them right. 1905, Japan defeats Russia, a European power with modern weapons and industrial backing. How? Through sheer determination and a willingness to die that Russian soldiers couldn't match. The lesson seemed clear. Spirit defeats material strength. Fast forward to December 1941. The Philippines falls in weeks. Singapore, considered impregnable by the British, surrenders when 80,000 Allied troops give up to a Japanese force half their size. The Dutch East Indies, Hong Kong, Burma, everywhere the pattern repeats. Western forces consistently fail to match Japanese determination. And the Marines. Japanese intelligence assessed them as garrison troops playing at being soldiers. A small force with outdated equipment and no recent combat experience. The reports were dismissive, almost contemptuous. One Japanese assessment called American Marines effeminate and cowardly, lacking warrior spirit. So when Colonel Ichiki receives orders to retake Guadalcanal from the small Marine garrison, he sees it as an opportunity for glory, not a military challenge. His superiors tell him to wait for reinforcements. He ignores them. Why wait? 900 elite Japanese soldiers should be more than enough to sweep away some Marines. Meanwhile, Major General Alexander Vandegrift has no idea what the Japanese think of his Marines. He's too busy trying to keep them alive. Vandegrift is 54 years old, a veteran of Nicaragua, Haiti, and China. He knows his men are good, but he also knows they're in serious trouble. The invasion of Guadalcanal, Operation Watchtower, was supposed to give them 6 months of training. They got 3 weeks. Equipment was still being unloaded in New Zealand. Intelligence on Japanese defenses was practically non-existent. The rehearsal landing was such a disaster that one officer called the entire operation impossible. But on August 7, 1942, 11,000 Marines land on Guadalcanal anyway. They capture their objective, an unfinished Japanese airfield, almost without opposition. Japanese construction workers flee into the jungle. For a brief moment, it seems easy. Then, the hammer falls. On the night of August 8-9th, a Japanese naval force devastates the Allied cruiser screen at the Battle of Savo Island. 4 cruisers sink, over 1,000 sailors die, and the fleet commander, fearing further losses, withdraws, taking most of the Marine supplies with him. The Marines are abandoned, stranded on an island with limited ammunition, limited food, and no reinforcements coming. Veterans would speak of this moment with bitterness for the rest of their lives. One commemorative medal, privately made after the battle, shows an admiral's hand dropping a hot potato into a marine's arms. The inscription reads, "Faciet Georgius," let George do it. Now the Marines are truly alone, holding a half-finished airfield on an island the Japanese are already moving to retake. Vandegrift's men dig foxholes in the volcanic soil and wait. The jungle around them swarms with malaria-carrying mosquitoes. The heat is suffocating. Within weeks, disease will disable more Marines than Japanese bullets. But they hold their perimeter. They work on finishing the airfield, and they wait for the attack they know is coming. They don't have to wait long. Colonel Ichiki lands at Taivu Point on August 19th with his 9,117 men. Japanese aerial reconnaissance has reported few American troops visible. A staff officer flew over Marine positions on August 12th and saw almost nothing. Imperial headquarters believes the Marines have withdrawn, leaving only a token garrison. Ichiki is told he might face as few as 2,000 defenders. The reality? 11,000 Marines. But even if Ichiki knew the truth, it might not have changed his plans. He has absolute faith in Japanese superiority. His men are from the 28th Infantry Regiment, elite troops originally designated to assault Midway Island. When that plan collapsed, they were redirected here. These are among Japan's best soldiers. Ichiki leaves 125 men as a rear guard and immediately marches toward Henderson Field with 792 men. His orders are clear. Wait for reinforcements? He ignores them. The Marines will collapse at the first assault. Why share the glory? But the Marines know he's coming. Jacob Vouza, a former sergeant major in the British Solomon Islands police force, has been gathering intelligence on Japanese movements. Japanese soldiers capture him and find an American flag hidden in his loincloth. They demand information about Marine positions. Vouza refuses. The Japanese tie him to a tree and use him for bayonet practice. 7 times they stab him in his arms, throat, shoulder, face, chest, and stomach. They leave him to die. He doesn't. After the Japanese move on, Vouza chews through his ropes and crawls through miles of jungle, bleeding from multiple wounds. He reaches Marine lines minutes before Ichiki's assault begins and warns them. Vouza survives. He'll receive the Silver Star and become an honorary sergeant major in the Marine Corps. But right now, because of him, the Marines are ready. 1:30 a.m., August 21st, 1942. Ichiki launches his assault across the sandbar at the mouth of Alligator Creek, which American maps incorrectly label the Tenaru River. The first wave of Japanese soldiers charges forward, bayonets fixed, screaming, "Banzai!" This is how it always works. The psychological pressure of a Japanese charge breaks Western troops. Their nerve fails. They flee, except the Marines don't flee. Instead, they pour devastating fire into the assault waves. Water-cooled .30 caliber machine guns, positioned along the creek with clear fields of fire, cut through the Japanese like scythes through wheat. Japanese soldiers fall by the dozens, then by the hundreds. The sandbar becomes a killing ground. Artillery batteries, pre-registered on approach routes before nightfall, drop shells directly on the assault formations. The accuracy stuns surviving Japanese officers. Every advance is met with coordinated fire. When Japanese soldiers reach the Marine lines, they face close combat that matches their own ferocity. Marines fight with rifles, bayonets, and bare hands. They give ground grudgingly, then counterattack. Private Al Schmid, a machine gunner, is wounded early when a grenade explodes near his position. Shrapnel destroys both his eyes. Blinded, he continues operating his weapon by touch alone, guided by his assistant gunner who directs fire by sound. He stays at his post until dawn. By sunrise, Ichiki's assault has failed completely. But the battle isn't over. Vandegrift orders a counterattack. Marines cross the creek upstream and swing around to encircle the surviving Japanese. M3. Stuart tanks, the Marines call them their Iron Cavalry, join the assault. The encirclement is methodical and brutal. Japanese soldiers trapped in the coconut grove try to swim to safety. They're shot in the water. Others fight to their last bullet, then charge with bayonets. Some commit suicide rather than face capture. The tanks roll through the grove, machine guns chattering, crushing wounded Japanese. Beneath their treads, One Marine later describes the aftermath. The bodies lay in clusters before the gun pits commanding the sand spit, as though they had not died singly but in groups. By 5 p.m. on August 21st, the Battle of the Tenaru is over. Of Ichiki's original 918 men, approximately 800 are dead. Perhaps 128 escape into the jungle. Marine casualties, 35 killed, 75 wounded. For every American who fell, more than 7 Japanese soldiers died. This isn't supposed to happen. This contradicts everything Japanese doctrine predicts. Colonel Ichiki burns his regimental colors to prevent their capture, a profound disgrace. He then either dies fighting or commits ritual suicide. The exact circumstances remain uncertain. What is certain? He doesn't survive to explain why his assault failed so catastrophically. When news of the Ichiki detachment's destruction reaches Rabaul, Japanese commanders react with disbelief. The reports must be wrong. A Japanese infantry regiment cannot be annihilated by American Marines. This is simply impossible. Imperial General Headquarters in Tokyo has the same reaction. The defeat is so unexpected that many officers refuse to accept it. Something must have gone wrong with Ichiki's plan. Perhaps he attacked the wrong position. Perhaps the reports exaggerate the casualties. The Marines themselves could not have been the problem. This denial has fatal consequences. Instead of reassessing their assumptions about American fighting capability, Japanese commanders conclude that Ichiki simply sent too few men. The solution is obvious: send more. Major General Kiyotake Kawaguchi receives command of the next attempt. He'll lead approximately 6,000 men from the 35th Infantry Brigade, veterans who fought successfully in Borneo and the Philippines. Kawaguchi is more thoughtful than Ichiki. He studies the reports from the Tenaru carefully. He understands the Marines are better prepared than expected. He knows a frontal assault across open ground would be suicide. His plan is sophisticated: march through the jungle to attack from the south, where the Marine perimeter is more lightly defended. A ridge running toward Henderson Field provides a natural avenue of approach. If his men can seize it in a surprise night attack, they can pour through and overrun the airfield before the Marines react. The ridge has no name in September 1942. After the battle, it will be called Edson's Ridge, or Bloody Ridge. The approach march is a nightmare. Kawaguchi's men struggle through terrain that destroys military formations. Trails disappear. Streams block routes. Dense vegetation makes coordination impossible. Units become separated. Supplies run out. Soldiers arrive at their assault positions exhausted, hungry, and disorganized. Some battalions never reach their attack positions at all. But Kawaguchi remains confident. Japanese fighting spirit will overcome any obstacle. Defending the ridge, approximately 800 Marines from the 1st Raider Battalion and 1st Parachute Battalion, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Merritt, Red Mike Edson. Edson is a remarkable officer, a veteran of Nicaragua with a reputation as one of the most aggressive commanders in the Marine Corps. His red hair earned him his nickname. His men both fear and respect him. Edson suspects an attack is coming. Japanese air raids have been hitting the ridge specifically. He positions his men carefully, with pre-registered artillery targets covering likely approach routes. On the night of September 12, 1942, Kawaguchi launches his assault. The fighting is among the most intense of the entire war. Japanese soldiers breach the Marine lines multiple times. At one point, they come within a few hundred yards of Henderson Field itself. If those final positions fall, the airfield is lost. But the Marines hold. Edson moves along the line under fire, directing counterattacks, refusing to give ground. When Marines begin falling back under the weight of Japanese attacks, Edson stands in the open and shouts, "The ridge! This is the ridge! Hold it!" Artillery fire, called in by forward observers, devastates Japanese assault waves. The coordination between infantry and artillery is critical to survival. When ammunition runs low, Marines fight with bayonets and rifle butts. Hand-to-hand combat rages across the ridge as Japanese soldiers who penetrate the lines are hunted down and killed. At one point, Japanese soldiers get close enough to Henderson Field to see the parked aircraft. American personnel begin preparing to destroy the planes rather than let them fall into enemy hands. Then, the Japanese attack falters. The combination of Marine resistance, artillery fire, and sheer exhaustion breaks Kawaguchi's offensive. By dawn on September 14th, it's over. More than 600 Japanese lie dead on the ridge and in the jungle approaches. The survivors retreat, beginning a nightmare march that will kill hundreds more from disease, hunger, and exhaustion. Vandegrift later admits this was the only time during the entire campaign he had doubts about the outcome. If the Japanese had broken through, he says, we would have been in a pretty bad condition. The Marines have held again. And this time, they've held against a force specifically designed to overwhelm them. The defeats of Ichiki and Kawaguchi should force a fundamental reassessment of Japanese assumptions. They don't. Japanese military culture doesn't encourage honest reporting of failures. Officers who admit their plans failed risk disgrace. It's easier to blame subordinates, bad luck, or unusual circumstances. So Japanese commanders conclude they need more men, more ships, more resources. The basic approach is sound. The execution was flawed. This time will be different. Lieutenant General Harukichi Hyakutake arrives on Guadalcanal on October 9th to personally oversee the next offensive. He brings the 2nd Sendai Division, one of the most illustrious units in the Imperial Japanese Army. Veterans of Manchuria and China, these men have proven Japanese superiority over Asian armies. Surely they'll prove it again against Americans. Over 20,000 Japanese troops will participate in a coordinated assault from multiple directions. Naval vessels will bombard Henderson Field. Air attacks will suppress American aviation. Hyakutake is so confident that his staff prepares plans for accepting the American surrender. They discuss the ceremony in detail. The date selected, October 23, 1942. Hyakutake sends a message to his superiors. The time of the decisive battle between Japan and the United States has come. He's right, but the battle won't go as he expects. The attacks begin on the night of October 23rd. Japanese tanks advance along the Matanikau River on the western side of the perimeter. Marines with 37mm anti-tank guns wait until the tanks are close, then open fire. One by one, the tanks are destroyed. But the main attack comes from the south, where the Sendai Division is supposed to achieve the decisive breakthrough. At one section of that line stands Sergeant John Basilone of the 1st Battalion, 7th Marines. Manila John, they call him. He served in the Army in the Philippines before joining the Marines. He's 25 years old, from Raritan, New Jersey, the 6th of 10 children in an Italian-American family. He commands 2 sections of heavy machine guns. And throughout the night of October 24th-25th, his position is attacked by approximately 3,000 soldiers from the Sendai Division. The results are catastrophic for Japan. Basilone fights through the night without sleep, without food, without rest. When ammunition runs low, he fights through enemy territory to bring back more, carrying 90 pounds of weapons and ammunition across 200 yards of ground swept by Japanese fire. When his gun crews are killed or wounded, he mans the weapons himself. When the machine guns jam from continuous firing, he repairs them under fire, burning his hands on superheated barrels. At one point, enemy bodies pile so high in front of his position that they block his field of fire. Marines have to leave their positions to push corpses aside. Private First Class Nash Phillips, who loses a hand in the battle, later describes visiting Basilone at the medical tent. He was barefooted and his eyes were red as fire. His face was dirty black from gunfire and lack of sleep. His shirt sleeves were rolled up to his shoulders. He had a .45 tucked into the waistband of his trousers. I will never forget him. By the time reinforcements arrive, only Basilone and 2 other Marines from his section are still standing. The ground in front of their position is carpeted with Japanese dead. Basilone will receive the Medal of Honor, the first enlisted Marine to earn the award in World War II. Similar scenes play out across the Marine perimeter. At another position, Lieutenant Colonel Louis Chesty Puller commands the 1st Battalion, 7th Marines. His battalion holds. So do the others. After the battle, Puller interrogates a Japanese prisoner. He asks a simple question. Why did you not change tactics when you saw you were not breaking our line? The prisoner's response reveals everything. That is not the Japanese way. The plan had been made. No one would have dared to change it. It must go as it is written. This rigidity, this absolute commitment to predetermined plans regardless of circumstances, combined with continuing underestimation of American fighting capability, proves fatal. The Japanese military system doesn't encourage initiative at lower levels. Officers who modify plans risk disgrace. The Americans are different. Marine officers adapt. When situations change, they change with them. When one approach fails, they try another. This flexibility, combined with individual Marines' stubborn refusal to abandon their positions, creates a defensive system the Japanese cannot break. The October offensive fails completely. Japanese casualties, between 2,200 and 3,000 dead. American casualties, fewer than 300 killed and wounded. The Sendai Division, one of the oldest and most distinguished units in the Japanese Army, has been shattered. For the first time, Japanese commanders seriously consider the possibility that Guadalcanal cannot be retaken. As 1942 draws to a close, Guadalcanal transforms completely. The island Japanese commanders expected to retake in days becomes what their soldiers bitterly call Starvation Island, a place where men go to die not from American bullets, but from disease, hunger, and despair. The Tokyo Express, nightly destroyer runs bringing reinforcements and supplies, cannot deliver enough. American control of Henderson Field means slow transport ships can't approach during daylight without being destroyed. Everything must come in on fast warships that make the run and escape before dawn. It's never enough. Japanese soldiers resort to eating roots, grass, and tree bark. They suffer from malaria, dysentery, beriberi, and tropical diseases their medical system is unprepared to treat. Strong warriors become walking skeletons. They develop a grim method of measuring survival time. He who can rise to his feet has 30 days left to live. He who can sit up has 20 days. He who must urinate lying down has 3 days. He who cannot speak has 2 days. He who cannot blink his eyes will be dead at dawn. They watch helplessly as American planes fly overhead from the airfield they couldn't capture. They hear American artillery, American bombers, American machine guns, and they know everything their commanders promised them was a lie. By December, General Hyakutake is desperate. On December 23rd, he sends a message to Tokyo. No food available, and we can no longer send out scouts. We cannot withstand the enemy's offensive. 17th Army now requests permission to break into enemy positions and die an honorable death rather than die of hunger in our dugouts. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto writes that the situation on Guadalcanal is much more serious than what the Japanese confronted in the Russo-Japanese War during the Siege of Port Arthur, one of the most difficult campaigns in Japanese military history. The Japanese evacuate Guadalcanal in early February 1943. Operation K is one of the most successful evacuation operations of the war. Over 3 nights, destroyers spirit approximately 10,600 surviving troops off the island. They leave behind over 14,000 dead from combat and another 9,000 who perished from disease and starvation. For every American killed on Guadalcanal, the Japanese lost nearly 10 men. Major General Kawaguchi, who failed at Edson's Ridge, understands what the losses mean better than most. After the war, when historians ask him to assess the campaign, he offers his verdict. Guadalcanal is the graveyard of the Japanese army. The Marines on Guadalcanal didn't set out to disprove Japanese ideology. They were simply doing what they'd been trained to do. But in holding Henderson Field against repeated Japanese assaults, they shattered one of the most dangerous assumptions in modern military history. Japanese commanders could no longer assume aggressive night attacks would cause American lines to collapse. They could no longer count on spiritual superiority to overcome material disadvantages. They had to fight Americans as equals. And in that kind of fight, American industrial production and logistical superiority would prove decisive. The tactical implications echoed through every battle that followed. In the Solomons, in New Guinea, in every subsequent campaign of the Pacific War, Japanese commanders would face opponents who would not break, would not surrender, and would not run. Major General Vandegrift received the Medal of Honor. He would become the 18th Commandant of the Marine Corps and the first Marine to hold 4-star rank while on active duty. Lieutenant Colonel Edson also received the Medal of Honor. The ridge he defended bears his name to this day. Sergeant John Basilone became a national hero. When offered a commission and stateside posting, he turned them down and requested to return to combat. On February 19, 1945, he was killed on the first day of the Iwo Jima invasion while destroying a Japanese blockhouse and guiding a tank through a minefield under heavy fire. He received the Navy Cross posthumously, the only enlisted Marine in World War II to receive both the Medal of Honor and the Navy Cross. He's buried in Arlington National Cemetery. The 1st Marine Division carries the word Guadalcanal on its shoulder patch to this day. Every Marine who has served in the division since 1943 has worn that patch, a permanent reminder of what their predecessors accomplished. Perhaps the most important legacy of Guadalcanal was invisible, the destruction of an idea. The Marines didn't win because they had better equipment. In many respects, their weapons were inferior. They didn't win because of numerical superiority. They were often outnumbered. They didn't win because of overwhelming firepower. Their supplies were limited throughout the campaign. They won because they fought. They held their ground when doctrine said they couldn't. They matched Japanese determination with their own. Japanese military leaders had spent years convincing themselves that Americans were soft, that American democracy produced citizens who valued personal comfort over sacrifice, that American materialism had corrupted the fighting spirit all true warriors needed. Guadalcanal proved them catastrophically wrong. The Marines who landed on Guadalcanal in August 1942 were mostly young men in their late teens and early 20s. Many had never been away from home. They were sick, hungry, undersupplied, and operating without naval support for weeks at a time. They held an airfield against the most elite troops the Japanese Empire could send. They did this not through some mysterious warrior spirit, but through discipline, training, and sheer stubborn refusal to give up. They did it because they were Marines. They did it because their officers told them the ridge had to hold, and they believed it. They did it because the men next to them were counting on them. When Japanese commanders learned what their soldiers faced on Guadalcanal, they began to understand the war would not end as planned. Admiral Yamamoto had warned of this before the war. In the first 6 to 12 months, I will run wild and win victory upon victory. But if the war continues after that, I have no expectation of success. Guadalcanal was where that prediction came true. The 6 months were over. The run of victories had ended. What remained was a grinding, brutal war of attrition that Japan could not win. Today, the battlefields of Guadalcanal are quiet. The jungle has reclaimed most of the fighting positions, but the memory remains. In the Marine Corps, Guadalcanal is sacred ground. The men who fought there established a reputation that carried the Corps through the rest of the war and into every conflict since. And in Japan, though the battle is less remembered than in America, its significance is understood by those who study the war. Guadalcanal was where the tide turned. Guadalcanal was where the myth of Japanese invincibility died. Guadalcanal was where everything changed, not because of superior weapons or overwhelming numbers, but because a group of young Americans refused to believe they were supposed to lose. If this story moved you, take a moment to like this video. It helps us share more forgotten stories from World War II. Subscribe to WWII to stay connected with these untold histories. Each one matters. Each one deserves to be remembered. Leave a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Our community spans the globe, from veterans to history enthusiasts, and you're part of something special here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for keeping these stories alive.